to awards. There's always, the grass always seems greener on the other side. So just focus a little less on that and focus more on yourself.
Now, we talk a little bit about Freedom Riders, but we kind of did mention a little bit, but it's an Emmy award-winning, Peabody award-winning film that you've done. How has that changed your life? Because that movie also was in The Butler. Parts of the clips was. Having that done in 2010 and now being used in the Lee Daniels film, The Butler. How was that doing something that far along and then also being used, a couple years later?
Right. That is just such an incredible journey that I could have never predicted. I'm still sometimes pinching myself because I remember being on, every minute was just painstaking work. It was a documentary on 1961, which means trying to find archival imagery was really, really challenging. The quote-unquote civil rights movement wasn't even called such in 1961. It's much later, 63 and beyond, after the March on Washington, one could say. So just that whole year-and-a-half process was just really tough, trying to excavate and find, it seems like we kept finding one shot in one state and another second of a shot in another state and another second of a shot in another country. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of put it all together in the edit room. It just didn't seem to come easily, like just tons of boatloads of stuff and there you are. I mean, it certainly was really, really rewarding, but we could have never imagined the outcome. And so once we, got through and delivered the film, we premiered at Sundance. So that was probably the first inkling of what we had. And I even think they were probably one of the first audiences. I mean, we literally sort of finished just at the end of the year and, shipped the tape and we're screening in the mid-January. And from there, we did, we got some press out of that, and then we did a limited theatrical through the DocuWeeks program. And then, a famous writer, I think it was Stanley Crouch or someone, saw the documentary through that process and got the film somehow to Oprah. And then from there, she ended up making a show out of the Freedom Riders. For the audience, studio audience, they were Freedom Riders. So literally her show and her resources flew every Freedom Rider in that they could find and could travel. And if they needed assistance or health aides, they brought them too and made them the entire audience. And we assisted them with some of the graphics and photos, for the documentary. She interviewed a couple, pinnacle people who were in the Freedom Rider movement. And then from there, since of course she was eventually in The Butler, they were filming The Butler, then they got in touch with PBS and then our production company, and then I just liaised a bit to help them find some people that they wanted to, some scenes that they wanted to clear for the feature film. So it was just this incredible journey that we could have just never, ever imagined. And then, in terms of social impact, I mean, I think even people in the Middle East asked for, copies of Freedom Riders, the film screen in China, in the United States. Young people have seen it, so that was just something we, really, really could not have imagined at all.
And Sundance was that your first festival you ever actually did?
For Freedom Riders, I was at Sundance once before, more as a coordinating producer on the documentary The Murder of Emmett Till in the early 2000s. So that was the first time there, but it was much more low-key. I was, just sort of starting out. It was my first film in PBS. And then years later, the second time was actually Freedom Riders. And by then, I was the producer. I had worked on lots more documentaries. I had co-produced 2 4-hour specials for PBS and then produced Freedom Riders, and so that was the first time to be on that kind of platform as a producer of a feature-length documentary. So that was an enormous just career boost, perhaps, but also just an emotional high, and I was just really, really mostly grateful and thankful and excited for the Freedom Riders, to finally get their due, if you will. They kind of got lost amidst all the civil rights movement.